Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't hide. In my chest that I can't hide. Feelings get involved, I'm terrified. Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you I'd give it one more try. Turn away and wrestle with my doubts. Oh, I leave them all behind, but don't know how. Bury my head deep within the crowd, but I'm reaching for your hand to pull me out. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? You can see straight through my life. Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't hide. When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you I'd give it one more try. Turn away and wrestle with my doubts. Oh, I leave them all behind, but don't know how. Bury my head deep within the crowd, but I'm reaching for your hand to pull me out. Oh, luck I wish I'd find. Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? You can see straight through my life. Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't hide. When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. 'Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you I'd give it one more try.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry about the extended opening there, but we're here now, right? So tonight we start off the novel. It's about 12 or 13 chapters. It is called Deceived. It is also, I wish I could show you the cover, but I tried bringing it up earlier and I just don't have it set up right to show this, but it is also based on the video game The Old Republic. So just like the comic series I read through last time. So it's called Deceived, and we're going to jump on into it. Get to the right chapter or right page here. All right. Here we go. Fat Man shivered, her metal groaning as Zirid pushed her through Ord Mantell's atmosphere. Friction turned the air to... I think we've got some typos. This one doesn't look like it was professionally made into a Mobi, so there may be some issues here. I may have to look for a different one if it turns into too big an issue. So all I get is the letters R-E. Friction turned the air to R. And Zirid watched the orange flow of the... Okay. It's messed up. All right. Hold on. Bear with me a minute. I have possibly another option. Because this is not going to work. Bear with me just a minute. Talk amongst yourselves. Let's see. I have a whole bunch of other stuff that I have got that is just not completely sorted yet. So let me see if I can find it in here. That one says there's nothing. Here, I hope. If not, okay, I have it in EPUB. Let's see if that's a better one. Luckily, I've got multiple copies of it that I've been able to get a hold of. So this one looks like it's more professionally done. So, all right. Fat Man shivered, her metal groaning as Zirid pushed her through Ord Mantell's atmosphere. Friction turned the air to fire, and Zirid watched the orange glow of the flames through the transparent steel of the freighter's cockpit. He was gripping the stick so tightly he realized and relaxed. He hated atmosphere entries, always had. The long 40 count when heat, speed, and ionized particles caused a temporary sensor blackout. He never knew what kind of sky he'd encounter when he came out of the dark. Back when he'd carted Havoc Squadron commandos in Republic Gully Jumper, he and his fellow pilots had likened the blackout to diving blind off a seaside cliff. You always hope to hit deep water, they'd say, but sooner or later the tide goes out and you go hard into rock. Or hard into the blistering crossfire. Didn't matter really, the effect would be the same. Coming out of the dark, he said, as the flame diminished and the sky opened below. No one acknowledged the words. He flew Fat Man alone, worked alone. The only things he carted anymore were weapons for the exchange. He had his reasons, but he tried hard not to think too hard about what he was doing. He leveled the ship off, straightened, and ran a quick sweep of the surrounding sky. The sensors picked up nothing. Deep water and it feels fine, he said, smiling. On most planets, the moment he cleared the atmosphere, he'd have been busy dodging interdiction by the planetary government. But not on Ord Mantell. The planet was a hive of crime syndicates, mercenaries, bounty hunters, smugglers, weapon dealers, and spice runners. And those were just the people who ran the place. Factional wars and assassinations occupied their attention, not governance and certainly not law enforcement. The upper and lower latitudes of the planet in particular were sparsely settled and almost never patrolled. A literal no-being land. Zirid would have been surprised if the government had servsats running orbits over the area. And all that suited him fine. Fat Man broke through a thick pink blanket of clouds, and the brown, blue, and white of Ord Mantell's northern hemisphere filled out Zirid's field of vision. Snow and ice peppered the canopy, frozen shrapnel beating a steady rhythm on Fat Man's hull. The setting sun suffused a large swath of the world with orange and red. The northern sea roiled below him, choppy and dark, the irregular white circles of breaking surf denoting the thousands of uncharted islands that poked through the water's surface. To the west, far in the distance, he could make out the hazy edge of a continent and the thin spine of snow-capped, cloud-topped mountains that ran along its north-south axis. Motion drew his eye. A flock of leatherwings, too small to cause a sensor blip, flew 200 meters to starboard and well below him. The tents of their huge, membranous wings flapping slowly in the breeze, freezing wind. The arc of the flock like a parenthesis. They were heading south for warmer air and paid him no heed as he flew over and past them, their dull black eyes blinking against the snow and ice. He pulled back on the ion engines and slowed still further. A yawn forced itself past his teeth. He sat up straight and tried to blink away the fatigue, but it was as stubborn as an angry bantha. He'd given the ship to the autopilot and dozed during the hyperspace run from Volta, but that was all the rack he'd had in the last 2 standard days. It was catching up to him. He scratched at the stubble of his beard, rubbed the back of his neck, and plugged the drop coordinates into the Navicomp. The comp linked with one of Ord Mantell's unsecured geosync-sats and fed back the location and course to Fat Man. Zirid's HUD displayed it on the cockpit canopy. He eyed the location and put his finger on the destination. Some island no one has ever heard of, up here where no one ever goes. Sounds about right. Zirid turned the ship over to the autopilot, and it banked him toward the island. His mind wandered as Fat Man cut through the sky. The steady patter of ice and snow on the canopy sang him a lullaby. His thoughts drifted back through the clouds to the past, to the days before the accident, before he'd left the Marines. Back then, he'd worn the uniform proudly and had still been able to look himself in the mirror. He caught himself, caught the burgeoning self-pity, and stopped the thoughts cold. He knew where it would lead. "Stow that, soldier," he said to himself. He was what he was, and things were what they were. Focus on the work, Z-Man. He checked his location against the coordinates in the NavComp. Almost there. "Gear up and get frosty," he said, echoing the words he used to say to his commandos. 90 seconds to the LZ. He continued his ritual, checking the charge on his blasters, tightening the straps on his composite armor vest, getting his mind right. Ahead, he saw the island where he would make the drop. 10 square clicks of volcanic rock fringed with a bad haircut of waist-high scrub whipping in the wind. The place would probably be underwater and gone next year. He angled lower, flew a wide circle, unable to see much detail due to the snow. He ran a scanner sweep, as always, and the chirp of his instrumentation surprised him. A ship was already on the island. He checked his wrist chrono and saw that he was a full 20 standard minutes early. He'd made this run 3 times, and Arago, he was sure the man's real name was not Arago, had never before arrived early. He descended to a few hundred meters to get a better look. Arago's freighter, the Doghouse, shaped not unlike the body of a legless beetle, sat in a clearing on the east side of the island. Its landing ramp was down and stuck out of its belly like a tongue. Halogens glared into the fading twilight and reflected off the falling snow, turning the flakes into glittering jewels. He saw 3 men lingering around the ramp, though he was too far away to notice any details other than their white winter parkas. They spotted Fat Man, and one waved a gloved hand. Zirid licked his lips and frowned. Something felt off. Flares went up from the freighter and burst in the air. Green, red, red, green. That was the correct sequence. He circled one more time, staring down through the swirl of snow, but saw nothing to cause alarm. No other ships on the island or in the surrounding sea. He pushed aside his concern and chalked his feelings up to the usual tension caused by dealing with miscreants and criminals. In any event, he could not afford to mess up a drop of several 100 million credits of hardware because he felt skittish. The ultimate buyer, whoever that was, would be unhappy, and the exchange would take the lost profits from Zirid in blood and broken bones, then tack it on to the debt he already owed them. He'd lost track of exactly how much that was, but knew it was at least 2 million credits on the note for Fat Man, plus almost half that again on advances for Ara's medical treatment, though he kept Ara's existence a secret, and his handler thought the latter were for gambling losses. LZ is secure, he hoped, saying it would make it so. Going in. The hum of the reverse thrusters and the swirl of blown snow presaged the thump of Fat Man's touching down on the rock. He landed less than 50 meters from Arago's ship. For a moment he sat in the cockpit, perfectly still, staring at the falling snow, knowing there'd be another drop after this one, then another, and he'd still owe the exchange more than he'd ever be able to pay. He was on a treadmill with no idea how to get off. Didn't matter, though. The point was to earn for Ara. Maybe get her a hover chair instead of that wheeled antique. Better yet, prosthesis. He blew out a breath, stood, and tried to find his calm as he threw on a winter parka and fingerless gloves. In the cargo hold, he had to pick his way through the maze of shipping containers. He avoided looking directly at the thick black lettering on their sides, though he knew it by heart. Had seen such crates many times in his military career. Danger, munitions, for military use only. Keep away from intense heat or other energy sources. In the crates were upward of 300 million credits worth of crew-served laser cannons, MPAPPs, grenades, and enough ammunition to keep even the craziest fire team grinning and sinning for months. Near the bay's landing ramp, he saw the 3 of the 4 securing straps had come loose from one of the crates of grenades. He was lucky the crate hadn't bounced around in transit. Maybe the straps had snapped when he set down on the island. He chose to believe that rather than admit to his own sloppiness. He did not bother reattaching the straps. Arago's men would have to undo them to unload anyway. He loosened his blasters in their holsters and pushed the button to open the bay and lower the ramp. The door descended and snow and cold blew in, the tang of ocean salt. He stepped out into the wind. The light of the setting sun made him squint. He'd been in only artificial light for upward of 12 hours. His boots crunched on the snow-dusted black rock. His exhalations steamed away in the wind. 2 of the men from Arago's freighter detached themselves from their ship and met him halfway. Both were human and bearded. One had a patched eye and a scar like a lightning stroke down one cheek. Both wore blasters on their hips. Like Zirid, both had the butt straps undone. Recognizing neither of them rekindled Zirid's earlier concerns. He had a mind for faces, and both of them were strangers. The drop was starting to taste sour. "Where's Arago?" Zirid asked. "Doing what Arago does," Scar said, and gestured vaguely. "Sent us instead. No worries, though, right?" No Scar shifted on his feet, antsy, twitchy. Zirid nodded, kept his face expressionless as his heart rate amped up and adrenaline started making him warm. Everything smelled wrong, and he'd learned over the years to trust his sense of smell. "You Zirid?" Scar asked. "Z-Man." No one called him Zirid except his sister-in-law. And Aaron, once, but Aaron had been long ago. "Z-Man," echoed No Scar, shifting on his feet and half giggling. "Sound funny to you?" Zirid asked him. Before No Scar could answer, Scar asked, "Where's the cargo?" Zirid looked past the 2 men before him to the third, who lingered near the landing ramp of Arago's ship. The man's body language, too focused on the verbal exchange, too coiled, reinforced Zirid's worry. He reminded Zirid of the way rooks looked when facing Imperials for the first time. All attitude and hair trigger. Suspicion stacked up into certainty. The drop didn't just smell bad, it was bad. Arago was dead, and the crew before him worked for some other faction on the Ord Mantell, or worked for some organization sideways to the exchange. Whatever. Didn't matter to Zirid. He never bothered to follow who was fighting who, so he just trusted no one. But what did matter to him was that the 3 men standing before him probably had tortured information from Arago and would kill Zirid as soon as they confirmed the presence of the cargo. But there could be still more men hidden aboard the freighter. It seemed he'd descended out of atmospheric blackout and into a crossfire after all. What else was new? "Why you call that ship Fat Man?" No Scar asked. Arago must have told him the name of Zirid's ship because Fat Man bore no identifying markings. Zirid used fake ship registries on almost every planet on which he docked. "'Cause it takes a lot to fill her belly." "Ship's a she, though, all right? Why not Fat Woman?" Seemed disrespectful. No Scar frowned. "Huh? To who?" Zirid did not bother to answer. All he'd wanted to do was drop off the munitions, retire some of his debt to the exchange, and get back to his daughter before he had to get back out in the black and get dirty again. "Something wrong?" Scar asked, his tone wary. "You look upset." "No," Zirid said, and forced a half smile. "Everything's the same as always." The men plastered on uncertain grins, unclear on Zirid's meaning. "Right," Scar said. "Same as always." Knowing how things would go, Zirid felt the calm he usually did when danger impended. He flashed for a moment on Ara's face, on what she'd do if he died on Ord Mantell, on some no-name island. He pushed the thoughts away. No distractions. Cargo's in the main bay. Send your man around. The ship's open. The expressions on the faces of both men hardened. The change nearly imperceptible, but clear to Zirid. A transformation that betrayed their intention to murder. Scar ordered No Scar to go check the cargo. He'll need a lifter, Zirid said, readying himself, focusing on speed and precision. That stuff ain't a few kilos. No Scar stopped within reach of Zirid, looking back at Scar for guidance, his expression uncertain. Nah, said Scar, his hand hovering near his holster, the motion too casual to be casual. I just want him to make sure it's all there. Then I'll let my people know to release payment. He held up his arm as if to show Zirid a wrist comlink, but the parka covered it. It's all there, Zirid said. Go on, said Scar to No Scar. Check it. Oh, Zirid said and snapped his fingers. There is one other thing. No Scar sighed, stopped, faced him, eyebrows raised in a question, breath steaming out of his nostrils. What's that? Zirid made a knife of his left hand and drove his fingertips into No Scar's throat. While No Scar crumpled to the snow, gagging, Zirid jerked one of his blasters free of its hip holster and put a hole through Scar's chest before the man could do anything more than take a surprised step backward and put his hand on the grip of his own weapon. Scar staggered back 2 more steps, his mouth working but making no sound. His right arm held up, palm out, as if he could stop the shot that had already killed him. As Scar toppled to the ground, Zirid took a wild shot at the third man near the doghouse's landing ramp, but missed high. The third man made himself small beside the doghouse, drew his blaster pistol, and shouted into a wrist comlink. Zirid saw movement within the cargo bay of Arago's ship. More men with ill intent. No way to know how many. He cursed, fired a covering shot, then turned and ran for Fat Man. A blaster shot put a smoking black furrow through the sleeve of his parka, but missed flesh. Another rang off the hull of Fat Man. A third shot hit him square in the back. It felt like getting run over by a speeder. The impact drove the air from his lungs and plowed him face first into the snow. He smelled smoke. His armored vest had ablated the shot. Adrenaline got him to his feet just as fast as he had gone down. Gasping, trying to refill his lungs, he ducked behind a landing skid for cover and wiped the snow from his face. He poked his head out for a moment to look back, saw that No Scar had stopped gagging and started being dead, that Scar stayed politely still, and that 6 more men were dashing toward him, 2 armed with blaster rifles and the rest with pistols. His armor would not stop a rifle bolt. A shot slammed into the landing skid, another into the snow at his feet. Another. Stang! He cursed. The safety of Fat Man's landing ramp and cargo bay, only a few steps from him, somehow looked 10 kilometers away. He took a blaster in each hand, stretched his arms around to either side of the landing skid, and fired as fast as he could pull the trigger in the direction of the onrushing men. He could not see and did not care if he hit anyone. He just wanted to get them on the ground. After he'd squeezed off more than a dozen shots with no return fire, he darted out from behind the skid and toward the ramp. He reached it before the shooters recovered enough to let loose another barrage. A few bolts chased him up the ramp, ringing off the metal. Sparks flew, and the smell of melted plastoid mixed with the ocean air. He ran past the button to raise the ramp, struck at it, and hurried on toward the cockpit. Only after he'd nearly cleared the cargo bay did it register with him that he wasn't hearing the whir of turning gears. He whirled around, cursed. In his haste, he'd missed the button to raise the landing ramp. He heard shouts from outside and dared not go back. He could close the bay from control panel in the cockpit, but he had to hurry. He pelted through Fat Man's corridors, shouldered open the door to the cockpit, and started punching in the launch sequence. Fat Man's thrusters went live and the ship lurched upward. Blaster fire thumped off the hull, but did no harm. He tried to look down out of the canopy, but the ship was angled upward, and he could not see the ground. He punched the control to move it forward, and heard the distant squeal of metal on metal. It had come from the cargo bay. Something was slipping around in there. The loose container of grenades. And he'd still forgotten to seal the bay. Cursing himself for a fool, he flicked the switch that brought up the ramp, then sealed the cargo bay and evacuated it of oxygen. If anyone had gotten aboard, they would suffocate in there. He took the controls in hand and fired Fat Man's engines. The ship shot upward. He turned her as he rose, took a look back at the island. For a moment he was confused by what he saw, but realization dawned. When Fat Man had lurched up and forward, the remaining straps securing the container of grenades had snapped and the whole shipping container had slid right out the open landing ramp. He was lucky it hadn't exploded. The men who had ambushed him were gathered around the crate, probably wondering what was inside. A quick head count put their number at 6, so he figured none had gotten on board Fat Man, and none of them seemed to be making for Arago's ship. So Zirid assumed they had no intention of pursuing him in the air. Maybe they were happy enough with the one container. Amateurs, then. Pirates, maybe. Zirid knew he would have to answer to Oren, his handler, not only for the deal going sour, but also for the lost grenades. Criffing treadmill just kept going faster and faster. He considered throwing Fat Man's ion engines on full, clearing Ord Mantell's gravity well, and heading into hyperspace, but changed his mind. He was annoyed and thought he had a better idea. He wheeled the freighter around and accelerated. Weapons going live, he said, and activated the over and under plasma cannons mounted on Fat Man's sides. The men on the ground, having assumed he would flee, did not notice him coming until he'd closed to 500 meters. Faces stared up at him, hands pointed, and the men started to scramble. A few blaster shots from one of the men traced red lines through the sky, but a blaster could not harm the ship. Zirid took aim. The targeting computer centered on the crate. "LZ is hot," he said, and lit them up. For an instant, pulsing orange lines connected the ship to the island, the ship to the crate of grenades. Then as the grenades exploded, the lines blossomed into an orange cloud of heat, light, and smoke that engulfed the area. Shrapnel pattered against the canopy, metal this time, not ice, and the shock wave rocked Fat Man slightly as Zirid peeled the ship off and headed skyward. He glanced back, saw 6 motionless, smoking forms scattered around the blast radius. "That was for you, Arago." He would still have some explaining to do, but at least he'd taken care of the ambushers. That had to be worth something to the exchange. Or so he hoped. Okay, then it switches gears here. Darth Malgus strode the auto walk, the steady rap of his boots on the pavement, the tick of a chrono counting down the limited time remaining to the Republic. Speeders, swoops, and air cars roared above him in unending streams, the motorized circulatory system of the Republic's heart. Skyrises, bridges, lifts, and plazas covered the entire surface of Coruscant, to the height of kilometers, all of it the trappings of a wealthy, decadent civilization, a sheath that sought to hide the rot in a cocoon of duracrete and transparasteel. But Malgus smelled the decay under the veneer, and he would show them the price of weakness, of complacency. Soon it would all burn. He would lay waste to Coruscant. He knew this. He had known it for decades. Memories floated up from the depths of his mind. He recalled his first pilgrimage to Korriban, remembered the profound sense of holiness he had felt as he walked in isolation through its rocky deserts, through the dusty canyons lined with the tombs of his ancient Sith forebears. He had felt the Force everywhere, had exulted in it, and in his isolation it had showed him a vision. He had seen systems in flames, the fall of a galaxy-spanning government. He had believed then, had known then, and ever since, that the destruction of the Jedi and their republic would fall to him. "What are you thinking of, Veridon?" Alina asked him. Only Alina called him by his given name, and only when they were alone. He enjoyed the smooth way the syllables rolled off her tongue and lips, but he tolerated it from no others. "I am thinking of fire," he said, the hated respirator partially muffling his voice. She walked beside him, as beautiful and dangerous as an elegantly crafted Ianvarok. I think that's supposed to be an I. She clucked her tongue at his words, eyed him sidelong, but said nothing. Oh, it is an L. Her lavender skin looked luminescent in the setting sun. Crowds thronged the plaza in which they walked, laughing, scowling, chatting. A human child, a young girl, caught Malgus's eye when she squealed with delight and ran to the waiting arms of a dark-haired woman, presumably her mother. The girl must have felt his gaze. She looked at him from over her mother's shoulder, her small face pinched in a question. He stared at her as he walked, and she looked away, burying her face in her mother's neck. Other than the girl, no one else marked his passage. The citizens of the Republic felt safe so deep in the core, and the sheer number of beings on Coruscant granted him anonymity. He walked among his prey, cowled, armored under his cloak, unnoticed and unknown, but heavy with purpose. "This is a beautiful world," Alina said. "Not for very much longer." His words seemed to startle her, though he could not imagine why. "Veridon." He saw her swallow, look away. Whatever words she intended after his name seemed stuck on the scar that marred her throat. "You may speak your mind, Alina." Still she looked away, taking in the scenery around them, as if memorizing Coruscant before Malgus and the Empire lit it aflame. "When will the fighting end?" The premise of the question confounded him. "What do you mean?" "Your life is war, Veridon. Our life. When will it end? It cannot always be so." He nodded then, understanding the flavor of the conversation to come. She would try to disguise self-perceived wisdom behind questions. As usual, he was of two minds about it. On the one hand, she was not a servant. She was but a servant, a woman who provided him companionship when he wished it. On the other hand, she was Alina, his Alina. "You choose to fight beside me, Alina. You have killed many in the name of the Empire." The lavender skin of her cheeks darkened to purple. "I have not killed for the Empire. I fight and kill for you. You know this. But you fight for the Empire? Only for the Empire?" "No, I fight because that is what I was made to do, and the Empire is the instrument through which I realize my purpose. The Empire is war made manifest. That is why it is perfect." She shook her head. "Perfect? Millions die in its wars. Billions. Beings die in war. That is the price that must be paid." She stared at a group of children following an adult, perhaps a teacher. The price for what? Why constant war? Why constant expansion? Why is it the Empire? What is it the Empire wants? What is it you want? Behind his respirator, he smiled as he might when entertaining the questions of a precocious child. "Want is not the point. I serve the Force. The Force is conflict. The Empire is conflict. The two are congruent." "You speak as if it were mathematics." "It is. The Jedi do not think so." He fought down a flash of anger. "The Jedi understand the Force only partially. Some of them are even powerful in its use, but they fail to comprehend the fundamental nature of the Force, that it is conflict. That a light side and a dark side exist is proof of this." He thought the conversation over, but she did not relent. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why conflict? Why would the Force exist to foment conflict and death? He sighed, becoming agitated, because the survivors of the conflict come to understand the Force more deeply. Their understanding evolves. That is purpose enough. Her expression showed that she still did not understand. His tone sharpened as his exasperation grew. Conflict drives a more perfect understanding of the Force. The Empire expands and creates conflict. In that regard, the Empire is an instrument of the Force. You see, the Jedi do not understand this. They use the Force to repress themselves and others, to enforce their version of tolerance, harmony. They are fools, and they will see that after today. For a time, Alina said nothing, and the hum and buzz of Coruscant filled the silent gulf between them. When she finally spoke, she sounded like the shy girl he had first rescued from the slave pens of Geonosis. Constant war will be your life, our life, nothing more? He understood her motives at last. She wanted their relationship to change, wanted it too to evolve. But his dedication to the perfection of the Empire, which allowed him to perfect his understanding of the Force, precluded any preeminent attachments. I am a Sith warrior, he said. And things with us will always be as they are? Master and servant, this displeases you? You do not treat me as a servant, not always. He let a hardness he did not feel creep into his voice. Yet a servant you are, do not forget it. The lavender skin of her cheeks darkened to purple, but not with shame, with anger. She stopped, turned, and stared directly into his face. He felt as if the cowl and respirator he wore hid nothing from her. You know your nature better than you know yourself. I nursed you after the Battle of Alderaan, when you lay near death from the Jedi Witch. You speak with words in earnest, conflict, evolution, perfection, but belief does not reach your heart. He stared at her. The twin stalks of her lekku. Oh, she must be Twi'lek. Okay. Of her lekku, framing the lovely symmetry of her face. She held her eyes, unflinching, the scar that stretched across her throat visible under her collar. Struck by her beauty, he grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her to him. She did not resist and pressed her curves against him. He slipped his respirator to the side and kissed her with his ruined lips, kissed her hard. Perhaps you do not know me as well as you imagine, he said, his voice unmuffled by the mechanical filter of his respirator. As a boy, he had killed a Twi'lek servant woman in his adopted father's house, his first kill. She had committed some minor offense he could no longer recall, and that had never mattered. He had not killed her because of her misdeed. He had killed her to assure himself that he could kill. He still recalled the pride with which his adoptive father had regarded the Twi'lek corpse. Soon afterward, Malgus had been sent to the Sith Academy on Dromund Kaas. I think I do know you, she said, defiant. He smiled, she smiled, and he released her. He replaced his respirator and checked the chrono on his wrist. If all went as planned, the defense grid should come down in moments. A surge of emotion went through him, born in his certainty that his entire life had for its purpose the next hour, that the Force had brought him to the moment when he would engineer the fall of the Republic and the ascendance of the Empire. His comlink received a message. He tapped a key to decrypt it. It is done, the words read. The Mandalorian had done her job. He did not know the woman's real name, so in his mind she had become a title, the Mandalorian. He knew only that she worked for money, hated the Jedi for some personal reason, known only to herself, and was extraordinarily skilled. The message told him that the planet's defense grid had gone dark, yet none of the thousands of sentients who shared the plaza with him looked concerned. No alarm had sounded. Military and security ships were not racing through the sky. The civilian and military authorities were oblivious to the fact that Coruscant's security net had been compromised. But they would notice it before long, and they would disbelieve what their instruments told them. They would run a test to determine if the readings were accurate. By then, Coruscant would be aflame. "We are moving," he keyed into the device. "Meet us within." He took one last look around at the children and their parents, playing, laughing, eating, everyone going about their lives, unaware that everything was about to change. "Come," he said to Alina, and picked up his pace. His cloak swirled around him, so too his anger. Moments later, he received another coded transmission, this one from the hijacked dropship. "Jump complete. On approach. Arrival in 90 seconds. Ahead, he saw the 4 towers surrounding the stacked tiers of the Jedi Temple, its ancient stone as orange as fire in the light of the setting sun. The civilians seemed to give it a wide berth, as if it were a holy place rather than one of sacrilege. He would reduce it to rubble. He walked toward it, and fate walked beside him. Statues of long-dead Jedi Masters lined the approach to the temple's enormous doorway. The setting sun stretched the statues' tenebrous forms across the Durcrete. He walked through the shadows and past them, noting some names: Odan-Ur, Uru, Arca-Jeth. "You have been deceived," he whispered to them. "Your time is past." Most of the Jedi Order's current masters were away, either participating in the sham negotiations on Alderaan or protecting Republic interests off-planet. But the temple was not entirely unguarded. 3 uniformed Republic soldiers, I don't know where I got guards, blaster rifles in hand, stood watchful near the doors. He sensed 2 more on the high ledge to his left. So, the negotiations on Alderaan, that's what's going on in that comic mini-series I read the last reading, in case you had forgotten. Alina tensed beside him, but she did not falter. He checked his chrono again, 53 seconds. The 3 soldiers, wary, watched him and Alina approach. One of them spoke into a wrist comlink, perhaps querying a command center within. They would not know what to make of Malgus. Despite the war, they felt safe in their enclave in the center of the Republic. He would teach them otherwise. "Stop right there," one of them said. "I cannot stop," Malgus said, too softly to hear behind the respirator. "Not ever." Okay. Okay, we're almost there. Just a few more pages. Still heart, still mind, these things eluded Aaron, floated before her like snowflakes in sun, visible for a moment, then melted and gone. She fiddled with the smooth coral beads of the Nautolan tranquility bracelet Master Zalo had given her when she'd been promoted to Jedi Knight. Silently counting the smooth, slick beads, sliding them over their chain one after another, she sought the calm of the Force. So it's changed a little bit here. No use. What was wrong with her? Outside, speeders hummed past the large window that looked out on a bucolic, beautiful Alderaanian landscape, suitable for a painting. Inside, she felt turmoil. Ordinarily, she was better able to shield herself from surrounding emotions. She usually considered her empathetic sense a boon of the Force, but now she realized she was bouncing her leg. Stopped. She crossed and uncrossed her legs. Did it again. Sayo sat beside her, calloused hands crossed over his lap, as still as the towering statuary of Alderaanian statesmen that lined the domed, marble-tiled hall in which they sat. Light from the setting sun poured through the window, pushing long shadows across the floor. Sayo did not look at her when he spoke. "You are restless." "Yes." In truth, she felt as if she were a boiling pot, the steam of her emotional state seeking escape around the lid of her control. The air felt charged, agitated. She would have attributed the feelings of the stress of the peace negotiations, but it seemed to her something more. She felt a doom creeping up on her, a darkness. Was the Force trying to tell her something? Restlessness ill suits you, Sayo said. I know, I feel odd. His expression did not change behind his short beard, but he would know to make her feeling, but he would know to take her feeling seriously. Odd? How? She found his voice calming, which she supposed was part of the reason he had spoken. As if something is about to happen. I can explain it no better than that. This originates from the Force, from your empathy? I don't know. I just feel like something is about to happen. He seemed to consider this, then said, something is about to happen. He indicated with a glance the large double doors to their left, behind which Master Darnala and Jedi Knight Satele Shan had begun negotiations with the Sith delegation. An end to the war, if we are fortunate. She shook her head. Something other than that. She licked her lips, shifted in her seat. They sat in silence for a time. Aaron continued to fidget. Sayo cleared his throat, and his brown eyes fixed on a point across the hall. He spoke in a soft tone. They see your agitation. They interpret it as something it is not. She knew. She could feel their contempt, an irritation in her mind akin to a pebble in her boot. A pair of dark-cloaked Sith, members of the Empire's delegation to Alderaan, sat on a stone bench along the wall opposite Aaron and Sayo. 15 meters of polished marble floor, the 2 rows of Alderaanian statuary, and the gulf of competing philosophies separated Jedi and Sith. Unlike Aaron, the Sith did not appear agitated. They appeared coiled. Both of them leaned forward, forearms on their knees, eyes on Aaron and Sayo, as if they might spring to their feet at any moment. Aaron sensed their derision over her lack of control, could see it in the curl of the male's lips. It is really unusual for somebody to have become a Jedi and be that agitated. That's kind of not the Jedi way, isn't it? She turned her eyes from the Sith and tried to occupy her mind by reading the names engraved on the pedestals of the statues. Kirs Dorana, Velben Or, others she'd never heard of, but the presence of the Sith pressed against her Force sensitivity. She felt as if she were submerged deep underwater. The pressure pushed against her. She kept waiting for her ears to pop, to grant her release in a flash of pain, but it did not come, and her eyes kept returning to the Sith pair. The woman, her slight frame lost in the shapelessness of her deep blue robes, glared through narrow, pale eyes. Her long, dark hair, pulled into a top knot, hung like a hangman's noose from her scalp. The slim human man who sat beside her had the same sallow skin as the woman, the same pale eyes, the same glare. Aaron assumed them to be siblings. His dark hair and long beard, braided and forked in 2 tines, could not hide a face so lined with scars and pitted with pockmarks that it reminded Aaron of the ground after an artillery barrage. Her eyes fell to the thin hilt of the man's lightsaber, the bulky, squared-off hilt of the woman's. She imagined their parents had noticed brother and sister Force potential when they had been young and shipped them off to Dromund Kaas for indoctrination. She knew that's what they did with Force sensitives in the Empire. If true, the Sith sitting across from her hadn't really fallen to the dark side. They never had a chance to rise and become anything else. She wondered how she might have turned out had she been born in the Empire. Would she have trained at Dromund Kaas, her empathy put in service to pain and torture? Do not pity them, Sayo said in Bocce, as if reading her thoughts. Bocce sounded awkward on his lips. Or doubt yourself. His insight surprised her only slightly. He knew her well. Who is the empath now? She answered in the same tongue. They chose their path, as we all do. I know, she said. She shook her head over the wasted potential, and the eyes of both Sith tracked her movement with the alert, focused gaze of predators tracking prey. The academy at Dromund Kaas had turned them into hunters, and they saw the universe through a hunter's eyes. Perhaps that explained the war in microcosm. But it did nothing to explain the proposed peace, and perhaps that is why Aaron felt so ill at ease. The offer to negotiate an end to the war had come like a lightning strike from the Sith Emperor. Unbidden, unexpected, sending a jolt through the government of the Republic. The Empire and the Republic had agreed to meeting on Alderaan, the scene of an earlier Republic victory in the war. The number and makeup of the two delegations limited and strictly prescribed. To her surprise, Aaron was among the Jedi selected, though she was stationed perpetually outside the negotiation room. You have been honored by this selection, Master Zalo had told her before she took the ship for Alderaan, and she knew it to be true, yet she had felt uneasy since leaving Coruscant. She felt even less at ease on Alderaan. It wasn't that she had fought on Alderaan before, it was something else. I am fine, she said to Sio, hoping that saying it would work a spell and make it so. Lack of sleep, perhaps. Be at ease, he said. Everything will work out. She nodded, trying to believe it. She closed her eyes on the Sith and fell back on Master Zalo's teaching. She felt the force within and around her, a matrix of glowing lines created by the intersection of all living things. As always, the line of Master Zalo glowed as brightly as a guiding star in her inner space. She missed him, his calm presence, his wisdom. Focusing inward, she picked a point in her mind, made it a whole, and let her unease drain into it. Calm settled on her. When she opened her eyes, she fixed them on the male Sith. Something in his expression, a knowing look in his eye, half hidden by his sneer, troubled Aaron, but she kept her face neutral and held his gaze as still as a sculpture. I see you, the Sith said from across the room. And I you, she answered, her voice steady. And that is the end of that chapter, and that is all I'm reading for tonight. So we will get back on to chapter 2 next time. That should be Monday. And I don't know. I'm enjoying it so far. Not so bad. So we'll see where it goes. We've got about 12 chapters to go. So see you then.
Because I have seen you fall apart, I have no rules about to play. I didn't have anything to say. Follow your heart, don't overtake it. If you leave it behind, someone will break it. I left you my heart, what did you do? You used it and abused it. You let me all shine inside. Was my love untrue? Was it that bad? You had no answers in life. Don't know without you how will I